Okay. Okay. The volume is working. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode. I'm going to be, in some sense, running past a lot of stuff. I want to communicate in this episode because of its importance and, of course, due to a subtle time limit. The great distraction of self. The idea follows that human beings are creatures of attention and that their thoughts are a part of their attention. And as much as a person can distract you, an object can distract you, the subjects in this world can distract you as well. And I wondered, what is this greatest distraction of them all? And I realized how the life of the human being is at first a sort of obsession of self. We are obsessed. We have no choice. It's kind of like the universal design. Egos would, whether we like it or not, animate eventually. You know, I personally, in 2011, I found myself in a very unique moment where I felt the way the karma of the world was appearing to me was that it was as if I was in karmic quarantine. There was a sort of denial of progress of my own expectations. It seemed as if the world was rejecting my view on it. That's how it felt. And so I was sitting on this rock in the middle of a river. It was Edwards Gardens. And as I was sitting there, I began asking a question. A question arose. A question arose in my life that it was so new and so never before experienced that it took away, as if my whole life till 2011 I was obsessed with a sort of projection of self. It stopped for a second. I remember the river moving from behind me, so I was watching the water go forth, and I was wondering, look at this world, it's time, it just moves, it just keeps going. And in that moment, I asked myself, do I know? It's like, who is looking through my eyes at this river right now? I remember it was so clear that for the first time I realized I did not know. I was trying to live, yet I did not know the life in my eyes. And I sat there and I had various thoughts, and each thought was observable. I'm like, oh my God, how have I been a thought my whole life? So what I mean by that is that it's as if I was on that rock imagine me asking myself repetitively, who is looking through your eyes? And I had a thought of me emerge. And then I was like, again, asking the question, who is looking through your eyes? And again, a thought of me appears. And eventually I realized the thoughts cannot be me because I can endlessly generate them. So it's as if the answers that the self that I see is only the self I see. When I realized that, it was a huge explosion of an emotional balance. I don't know how to tell you. It was as if my whole emotional intelligence recalibrated. Before, I was a person who I could tell you my own emotions were more important. My own thoughts were more important. My own eyes were more important. That means I was not only like I remember in my youth, like my family didn't like animals and plants, like we didn't like I mean I think it's typical for the average, you know Persian family member, Iranian family member, to not like insects, be as open to nature. There isn't a lot of people who have pets in Eastern countries. I remember I was so ignorant in my youth that I would crush an ant that I didn't like to be near me, and I shifted. And I reached a point, I remember, where I was sitting in nature and there was a group of ants and they all came and they literally passed by my hand. My hand was like their mountain for a moment. And I noticed eventually throughout life that we are living in two worlds that we think is one, and that's where all the trouble begins. Now, when I say the great distraction of self, this doesn't mean the self shouldn't be paid attention to. This doesn't mean just because something distracts you, you should get rid of it or get rid of the distraction. It means prior to any opinion you have formulated, there is always more observance that can be attained. So think of the human psychology as an intelligence that looks at things, then does stuff. Now, if it assumes it knows its environment, it will stop looking. If you assume the internet is at your fingertip, you won't really care for knowledge, you know? Knowledge had a certain process back in the day. It had a very core experiential process. Do you know how important it was? Just like how we have presidents in like their cabinets kind of discussing important national matters. We had people back in the day deciding whether they should this writing on a page deserves continuity. That means for a long time in our history, I have one of the most miracles. It's a wonder for me how, in some sense, the scribe psychology was. Just the fact that we have had scribes, people who looked at something, they were not even there for a creative effort. They just saw something and felt it deserved to remain. You know, a lot of people I personally believe on YouTube who are compiling like videos, it's as if like they have their eyes have been opened to the scribe's sight. So what I mean by that is that there was a very strange preservation. There is something about this flame of humanity, of our civilization that has endured, and we're like, it's like nowadays people don't even care about it. They're like, civilization, bro, I'm late for work. Forget it. Like it's like there's no motivation. Because we have, in some sense, this is a strange way of terming it, but we have defamed the world out of our inner realms. You see, there was a moment where there was no such thing as truth. It was just all a moment, just a moment of attention. It was just a creature that had no capacity to be aware of itself, but had a capacity to be aware that it was separate from the earth. So I want you to imagine a long period of evolution where it's like there isn't a more macro awareness of separation from earth, because on some level the consciousness of one being in a world, we can even attribute it to a point where with bacteria, like a single cell of bacteria is alone in the cosmos. That was the first. And if we feel in some sense there's a genetical pattern in regards to a cellular lineage, so it's as if like as cells we have already confronted the solitude of the cosmos. But it's now that reality is constantly recycling itself in more complex and crystallized patterns. Do you know? That means you may say there is hatred and you may say there is love in this world, but the types of love and hatred we have now are way more advanced than the love and hatred. And it's fascinating because as more love increases, so does hatred. Because let me tell you, we are social creatures, and the social civilization cannot be resourceful to every person's inner realm. Eventually, there will be some people in the world who they have to have the strength that as one hand raises the weapon, the other hand uses the whole right hand as a weapon and sheathes the sword. Do you know? So what I mean by that is like you can say hatred is when the outer world doesn't see your inner realm. The world doesn't know what was there, and only you see it. These are certain chaotic things. The human life, nobody said it's going to be like super easy. And if it was easy, we wouldn't live. That's the sad part. That's the sad part, that in today's civilization, we need quests. And I realized, I'm like, holy shit, what is this? That the whole video game industry is based on like a character in a game having to go complete a mission, you know, and then level up. And I was looking at life and I'm like, if there was a chance this life was a holographic simulation, as Michael Talbot says, as Elon Musk says, there's 1 billionth of a chance that we are right now in a video game that is indistinguishable from reality. I mean, sure, we see the pyramids of Egypt. There's no saying that there wasn't like a vast simulation machine. There was a certain author. In no way, I don't think I ever his name, but I remember the concept he shared. You know, and the concept he shared was that it's as if all of 2020 is still happening in 1948, and it was as if like a virtual technology took over. So it's as if the world began becoming hidden again. See, we are right now in a phase of the universal sector. People don't realize this, but your eyes are not just um, here to see stuff. They are your entrance into greater vision. And life has strangely a hierarchy. Like I didn't choose like you know, the lion eat biting the gazelle. I didn't choose, you know, the atmosphere kind of tearing apart, you know, like these are things that happen in life. A vast majority, I consider, if you have this mentality, you kind of calm down a little. It doesn't mean just because you hear an idea, that idea should be with you all the time. I'm saying that we are reaching a point where we are becoming, this is going to be an incredible way of saying it, but we are becoming thought walkers. We are walking between our thoughts. Do you know, we are it's a very strange concept, but it's for the first time where the mind psychology begins acknowledging a sort of wisp, ethereal kind of matrix of manifestation. So there's one way of saying, yes, you are a body in a very strange world, but then you can kind of see you are a strange body in a very familiar world. What does that mean? That means it's like I find there's hidden sight anywhere. A person can go touch a tree, and if they are sensitive enough, they can see who touched it before, and they can see much more, I personally feel. But of course, you have to have the navigation of your subjective realm and objective realm. The great distraction of self is an obsession of the survival of a subject in a void, in a vacuum. So, do you see how much the difference will be when you realize that there are some laws that, yes, you have to listen to, but there are some laws that you made that you are listening to? These are your inner realm. This is your inner realm. This is who you are as a character. And I'll be honest, guys, there's, my childhood, of course, I'm a 90s kid, 91. I could tell you that certain archetypes of greatness in history I was introduced to in my schooling as a young kid were people like Gandhi, like Martin Luther King. You know, Mother Teresa was one of them, but thanks to the efforts of Christopher Hitchens, she's now evil. You know, the world seemed to evolve and advance from the effort of the authentic self, of the authentic Homo sapien, the authentic creature, a creature that is not just aware of the physical constitution of matter. This is why I'm saying, before you even go study your subjective realms, before you even think about spirituality, you got to first look at objectivity. You got to become insanely comfortable and aware of the objective realm. After you have maintained the objective realm, then comes the subjective realm, and through the subjective realm's rhythmic kind of known unknown movements, you will suddenly experience a moment where the unknown is moving knowledge. That moment where the unknown is moving knowledge is literally a phase in the civilization psychology where the human individual consciousness is shifting into a collective presence. So this will either come to us, I predict, like technologically. This is one of those Mr. Within's far gazes. But I kind of see that it's either we're gonna embody a true collective experience through digital technological means. Either cyberspace culture is gonna bring forth the actual expression of a collective being, or it's going to be an evolutionary return to nature. Really, man has two options. It's like we made a choice long time ago. Our ancestors did, and that choice was to step out of the food chain. Now, by stepping out of the food chain, their mental faculties advance incredibly. But before stepping out of the food chain, though, their evolution was really like the biology of the body was the environment. You can see a person who's savage, like when Tarzan and Jane, like I don't know if the future generations, like my audience, knows who Tarzan is, but Tarzan was this dude who was like left in the forest, and gorillas brought them up as his own. So he was a kind of like manimal, man animal, man. He was like a human being, but he had the psychology of a gorilla. Do you know what I mean? So like, you know, you can't disrespect bananas around Tarzan. What I mean is, he was a person who his inner realm was transparent. The environment was the teacher of his mind. He did not have parents that were like, "All right, kid, this is your first step. You know, this is your first word. You know, this that." Like, there was no introduction of all the realms that the common kid in today's urban areas is kind of indoctrined, is taught. You know, there's two ways of treating your conditioning. Either you regret it or you don't. Those who don't regret anything, I sometimes I've wondered, it's like, why? And there's two reasons. That either that person is an ostrich, they've put their head in a sort of idea and they don't regret anything as long as they get that one idea, or the person is in some sense beyond the environment. There's some people who are like that. This is just the maturity that the youth dwell wondering about often. That what is this contentment? And it is the exposure of experience. Me as a human being, I could say, after a certain point in my life, I got pulled more to my inner realms. And the precision I had in my inner realms became a strange kind of. I can tell you for certain, many people who feel they're spiritual are escaping what is actually happening in front of them, or trying to subconsciously. There is a war that must stop in the subconscious before I find a strange kind of the universe, the presence of the cosmos reveals itself. The great distraction of self means that the person, the living being, the living moment, let's say the moment of attention, is more occupied with how it is receiving phenomena rather than how phenomena is being expressed. That means there is a way that you conduct a business deal where you think about what you got out of it only. And then there's a way of conducting the business deal. These are the very incredible smart businessmen of the future generations. They realize that ultimately ethics commands victory of the species. So what does that mean? That means, it's, imagine like there's a fine for win-lose deals. And so it's as if the negotiating parties have to negotiate endlessly till they find the win-win. And sometimes the win-win will require the certain problem to be changed. So some problems, I've looked at them, I've kind of had a hint of where the answer is, I've marched through into the unknown and I found the answer. But there are some problems that they're kind of like, they're tricksters. They're trick questions. And they are questions that their answer is in their dismantling of the question. There's something very important in the psychology of the human being to consider. The ideas the human being chooses becomes their vehicle. You choose a certain belief, I am telling you, that belief will rule your life. Now, it doesn't mean don't believe in things. Sometimes, like, the word belief, of course, can be spoken about in different ways. In some senses, a belief is a cage. It's a it's a grand filter. It's as if the guy has wore sunglasses, looking at the stars and wondering why the light of the stars is so dim. And instead of realizing he has glasses on, he's blaming the stars. So that's what I mean. There's a sort of reality where sometimes you take off the glasses that were never yours and you were looking through. This is kind of, I call, the wisdom of the old soul. The young is very engaging of the new, but the old soul knows what of the new needs to be engaged, I find. And this is me being playful, of course, because really I am a person who's saying we are such raw moments of direct experience that language is the content in our experience. It is not the experiencer. Ultimately, the experiencer is like, then what? Then what? It's like, who's watching who? Who's watching that who? Who's watching that who? And eventually, it's an ultimate regression. So it's kind of a strange way of the person treating their memories as an infinite regression. They're reverse engineering, kind of going back to the source of their conscious memory. Now, this kind of suggests that an advanced civilization is probably a civilization that will be seen in advanced ways. So by saying that the average human being just caring for, at least to the originality of their eyes, what advancement means and pursuing it, there is something in life, I call it, it is the, uh, they are once in a lifetime, let me say it like this, they are certain states of mind that will find the human being, where in those states of mind, the inner realm will know what the right action is. The outer realm is, how can I tell you? It's the difference of a thought moving you and observing a thought being moved. That subtlety. Just like how rare it would be if the person is in a very unique state of mind and they go and see an orca whale suddenly jump out of the water, like that fascinating feat of nature. You know, it's kind of like the human being is a bundle of signals. Now, not all of these signals are reaching the objective realm, but some of them do. And it has to do with the free will. The free will is another way of saying you can not choose the content of your mind. You can't choose how the world looks like, but you can choose. Um, let me see if I can say it in a different way. Nature is nature. That tree has nothing to do with what I think. Yet, as I see it, it becomes a part of my subjective realm. So it's kind of strange, but the eyes are recycling objectivity into subjectivity, and creativity is recycling subjectivity into objectivity. That means shifting its nature. Just thinking about how many human beings just open their eyes and just run after themselves, run after their future self. Most people are a slave to their future self. And not just because of the demands of survival, because I understand hard work. I understand the blue collar guy being an incredible, decent human being. But I cannot sleep without knowing why the eyes were open. And I searched for that answer only to come to the conclusion that it is now the time of the free will. So we have to no longer search for truth. We have to engage in the process of the emergence of it. And it's no longer subjective purely, it's experiential. So I'm kind of looking at civilization and I'm seeing the only way we can actually thrive is such a unique archetypal position, because that would mean the average human being no longer just is their body, no longer is just their color of their skin, is no longer just how they are an apparent expression of manifestation. The person now begins to be acknowledged by an unknown experiencer behind their eyes. This will open up in the linguistic simulation of our current civilization a strange opening. It will allow the future's psychological expression to feel mythologically authorized to itself. So what it means is that, think of it as if every person has a psychology, and that psychology is a container containing a certain range of conscious information. Okay? Now, that container, I am saying, we are beginning to realize is not a particle, it's a field. So the relationship of one with their inner life is an oscillation between self and world. You're being the world simultaneously as you're being yourself behind your eyes. You're being the world of that self. This was brought to my attention by the incredible words of a man named Papaji. There was a person who had come to him and was asking him about the ultimate. And that's the word, guys. Enlightenment is ultimate. Remember that. What I mean by that is there is no other in that mind, in the light of that view. So, anyways. Okay, guys, to continue. The guy comes to Papa G and tells him he's kind of there desperate, as if it's like some people, they have restless bodies, like it's like certain creatures, their objective realm is in more engagement than their subjective realms, in more suffering than their some people, their minds are suffering more than their bodies, some people, their bodies are suffering more than their minds. And ultimately, balance is a birthright. So when a person understands the law of balance, all the emotions that kind of attach images, interconnect memories to the present moment, a certain emotional wave will kind of like free the person from strangely a past. I don't know how to say it, but it's like your past is something you're drawing right now. And when you realize where the pen is and what is holding the pen, when you understand the true value of your attention, you will see the greatest distraction was the greatest finger pointing to the clarity. The greatest suffering was showing you that the mind can endure much higher, much more. So Papaji looks at this guy, this bewildered kind of tourist of a soul in manifestation. And Papaji says, "You who have traveled here, tell me this, in every moment of your life where you have taken a step, where you have gone on a journey, where you have traveled, you tell me, in all those journeys, in all those moments, has the awareness that existence is here changed?" And you will see that's a strange, common kind of subjective landscape that consciousness is. So your being is the space where all that you do arises from. And sometimes you don't change what you do, you got to change who you are first in your own eyes before you can advance or have certain authorizations of ability. It is true that they say, like, after some point you realize you had ability all along. You will realize all the mistakes that you made in your youth or whatever, it's like you could have not made them too. Do you know? But there will come a time where you just accept the design of life, and in its acceptance, it emerges as a new pattern, and that's it. That's what's up. It's like, who can stop the new from barging into the door of our ancient idea? I was wondering, kind of like, what if 8 billion beings were not obsessed by self? They were obsessed by their world. They were fascinated by it, not trying to escape it. That the religions made us want to escape the world. You see? Many, even the concept of certain traditions, it was like, okay, this place is messed up, let's go somewhere better. If we live like this, we'll go somewhere better. If we do this, we'll go somewhere better. If we sacrifice like the Mayans or Aztecs, like, we'll go somewhere better. But I am telling you, it's as if man creating his own paradise, like a carrot on a stick connected to a rope, putting it in front of himself, and his whole life being distracted by this glory of the self that only exists in the subtler realms. To awaken to who you really are sometimes means to forget the self. And sometimes when you forget the self, you come to a moment where everything you have studied is now. You see, there is nothing you can take from the world, and the world can take from you. And then the mind, for the first time, enters the Pure Lands. When the mind enters the Pure Lands, there is a strange gentleness. There is a gentleness of like an ultimate viewing indifference. Now, this ultimate viewing indifference, there's many ways. You see, the issue is, it's like people, we gotta, like, you know, what's his name? Richard Dawkins spoke about a selfish gene. I'm gonna say there's something called a lazy gene, you know, or a gene. It's the part of the mind that wants to get where a destination quicker. It's like you want to be at the destination before you go to the journey. And anytime you skip any journey towards a destination, there's a huge chance that you will not feel you deserve the destination. Do you know? This is why honor, the whole ethical mindset of, okay, why not tell the truth? You know, why not in some sense be true to the moment rather than an artificial infinitude? You know, I feel we are way more advanced as beings as we are sold to believe. I feel that the educational system is not it doesn't care about knowledge, and that's the sad thing. Do you know? They care about the appearance of knowledge, but to care about true knowledge means to confronting what is keeping knowledge. So, what does that mean, guys? I want you to think about it, all the human beings in this world and all the thoughts that they get in their minds. And I want you to know, just notice for a second, just like how the whole planet is in the void. And so out of in it's like really that is the story of the psychology of the human being. Out of nothing something appeared. We awakened to a conscious life. So if 8 billion people were not self-obsessed, where would their attention go? And that's the thing. That's the thing that I see the whole 8 billion people, all the human beings that are alive now, to be just a certain piano key. And when the time comes when nature's rhythms move, it's as if that piano key either trusts itself and plays its part or it doesn't. And when it doesn't, nothing happens. The melody goes on, but it's as if you miss out on the life that walked towards you. There's some things in life that come towards you, and there's some things in life you go towards. The more you are individually conscious driven, the more you have to go towards things to maintain. The more collectively conscious you're maintained, the more life happens. This is especially something that the New Age community and a lot of people who, let me say it like this, those metaphysically inclined, they reach this point where their inner realms kind of are renunciate. Their inner realms are kind of detached. Like some people hear about like the idea of the soul, you know, and so they're like, I'm a soul, man. I don't need to worry about this, you know, shit. I don't need to worry about this meaningless planet spinning somewhere, you know, like. But the thing is that a soul that is still bound to a story is not the real moment. When man, or let me say it like this, when the momentum of the vision of the species is willing to put down its objective weapon and shield, and to put down its subjective weapon and shield, and for a moment to look at the world and recognize a new action as possible. When you realize there is a new action possible in your life, do you know what that means? That means you could literally do something you have never done, and it will redefine your character. It will change you. There is a thing about the economical system that it is its own failure. You know why? Because I am telling you guys, even though we have access to the most advanced technologies, a lot of systems that are influencing all the other systems are not advanced, and they are not advanced internally. Externally, yeah, like the most, like, you know, incredible corporate environment known to man. But like internally, in regards to the vision of the consideration of the reality of the human being, it's as if the toys that we play with define us. The more the species is engaged with technological activity, the more it will care for how green the grass is. So we're in a situation where those people who at least don't want the trees to be just something written in history books, as if one day, like imagine, oh man, I gotta kind of interject a science fiction thing I'm working on. I have this story, and it's called an alien. What did I call it? The alien called language. And so I created it. This is a different science fiction work than all the other things I've said. Um, a different dimension of it, you can say. Uh, because that's the awesome thing, guys. When you get access to three-dimensional space, you get access to degrees of perception. And when you actually witness your subjective realms, and they kind of your thoughts appear as subjective phenomenology in space, then by you observing it, it's as if you are observing the mind that is doing the work. You know. So, in the science fiction setting, I had created a situation where the planet Earth had become, the surface of it had become like a burnt rock, and humanity somehow, due to certain galactic, magnetic powered kind of technology, I created these things called sky cities. So all of humanity is living in a sky city, and all the knowledge and stuff in humanity somehow has been erased. And really, what's running this kind of civilization, this Sky City, is that there's a General Dash King, and he's a man who's dressed in a general uniform, and he was the last general that somehow made it, from the field, and kind of he lifted up the last hope of humanity into the orbit before the planet kind of got messed up in the story, right? So he's a great person, but yet he's not a king, even though he has the position of a General Dash King, right? It's a strange militaristic monarchy in the story I have. I decided to infuse those ideas together. And in that moment, guys, in that moment, there's a scene, and so I want you to imagine like cities and on the sky, not too big of a city. They're not huge cities. It's like very few human beings technically are left compared to 8 billion. You know, you can say it's like a city of 100,000 human beings or whatever, right? And so in human history, the disaster on Earth was self-made. Humanity never found an opportunity to have contact on Earth because humanity couldn't keep the surface of the Earth intact, you know? So in these sky cities, the general has a son, a young son, and when the young son goes to school, they're giving it false history. Like literally, they have no access to all the previous knowledge. So every person in the sky city who remembered anything about the thing became a sort of scholar, and it's really educational driven, right? There's a lot of schools in the book. So check this out. Check this out. Look at what happens, right? This general is in the council in his main chamber, right? Kind of throne-like chamber, and he's with his councilmen, kind of there. Suddenly, out of nowhere, this extraterrestrial appears. And in my novel, I decided to make the first alien contact to be an enlightened alien instead of a chaotic, messed up one that wants to dominate, right? So this alien, I've kind of made it from the Andromeda Galaxy, and in all my science fiction novels, like the Andromeda Galaxy are very like they're liberated beings. They're much ahead of us. They're like the older brother of our galaxy. An alien appears. The alien in that instant is as if the whole moment freezes, and the alien really, like somehow I couldn't give it a shape, but the alien has a sort of appearance. You can think of like some white cloud or something. Like I don't know. So, anyways, check this out. So what happens? What happens? The alien appears. The alien appears in the throne room of the general, and the alien suddenly realizes what happened to the whole history of the planet and all the species, and realizes how even every person is looking at him, and immediately calms down their mind and says, I am not here to conquer you. I'm an advanced alien from an enlightened civilization. I'm here to enlighten every person here. And the general gets shocked, and suddenly there's something about the presence of the alien that it's as if no human being can be dishonest around him. you know. And so this extraterrestrial is there and says this, and there's something there that the king, this general king, suddenly looks at him and says, "Who are you? What do we call you?" You know. And this is why I named the you can say novel. Then I named it the alien called language. Because the alien says your human minds do not know anything more than language, so you can call me language. So I wanted to hit the audience in that moment with an immediate awareness of the language threshold. Yeah. So what happens? What happens? The general comes and says, "I." It's so like he agrees, but he says, "You have to teach my son first. You have to teach my son everything you know first." You know, and the alien is very peaceful and non-biased, and he says, "Okay." And the whole novel now is the conversation the kid has with this alien called language. And the kid asks, if I remember correctly how I designed it, like I think the kid first asked questions about the Earth, what's down there. The kid every day after school was just looking out at the black rock that was their thing. He's like, what happened out there? And suddenly the alien gives the exact history. And the kid gets shocked. It's like what he's been taught is different. And then the kid says, "How many people are there? Any people on Earth?" And the alien literally just for a second, he's like scanning the whole cosmos. The alien looks at the kid and says, "Yes, there's 6 people left on this Earth, but they have become too savage that they will never incorporate in your societies." And the kid is getting more shocked and more shocked and more shocked. You know. And eventually the kid starts asking questions about the alien, and that's where there's more, but I think the point was made that language and the sensitivity to it, and that the civilization can realize that the dimensions of its perceptions are not the root of its perception. Yeah, I find that it's kind of follows this kind of ideology, this way of thinking, where the person's like, okay, so in existence, we see individual beings, right? We see creatures that are individual. I see squirrels on the branch. And then you think, could it be possible that this existence of ours, if it had an ability to create an individually conscious creature, could it have an ability to create a collective conscious being? So, children are born. Could it be that collective fields of being are born? And of course, I have a very kind of unique approach in this because I feel space can be alive. Because I'm a bit old school, I acknowledge space as an element sometimes. And when I acknowledge it as an element, it becomes a body of use. So you can say sight travels through space. If there is a body in the attention, that body it would become suddenly have a gravitational pull. So it's kind of fascinating. No, objects of mass also have a gravitational pull on the people subjectifying them first. You know, so this wonder of like the universe gave birth to an individual conscious creature, and I thought, whoa, could the universe have also given kind of birth? I mean, the verb can be altered here, but like, uh, as the universe, could the universe also give birth to a collective unconscious being? And I looked at something, guys, and this is sometimes I call it like certain hypotheses that I make. Sometimes they're chaotic too. And I remember a chaotic hypothesis. I was like in Italy. I was in Mozzara, Italy. I was there a couple months, like just living in Italy. And when I was there, I had a very incredible philosophical day, as if I had my cappuccio, and I was there, and I wondered if the cells in my veins became conscious, created their own civilization, only to realize they are still the cells in my veins. I feel thought is a human game. And if there are higher dimensions, they surpass the language threshold, so it doesn't enter that moment with a story. Really, it's like the story of one's life becomes a coat you hang out when you go in, you take off the coat. There are certain states of mind. Think, and really, guys, we learn from the experiences we're drawn to, and the reason the concept of love remains. Like, why do people care about love? Because in love, their true selves are free, and they are not alone. So freedom, because you see, I find it hilarious, isn't it? Not hilarious, but I find it fascinating that Western civilization has held very high the banner of freedom, and I commend it for doing that. But we see the citizens realizing the inevitability of the solitude of the conscious viewer in a world. That's something that, regardless of how much freedom they give you, it's an inner thing to be aware of. I find that if the mind has an ability to neutralize and the mind has an ability to infinitize. So what do I mean by that? That means you can look at everything and think it's all hollow. You can look at this whole world and think it's a simulation. That's what oneness means, I find. Oneness means individuality does not have access to individuality. So if there is a consciousness, it has a choice between being a drop on a leaf or a drop in an ocean. You know? We are human beings. You can say, for as when you consider the scale of history, the scale of the universe, the length, the not the length, the time, it's as if you realize we are just kind of chimpanzee hybrids that are putting on clothing. It's as if our mind is not an animal, but our body is. And that means our body requires to survive like an animal to some degree, needs the vitality of the movements of an animal, but at the same time, the mind is not here to just be the program of nature. You see, it's there should be this hilarious saying. I'm going to create it, that a young soul gets enlightened, an old soul doesn't exist. Right. So Wax, Bobby, welcome guys to the chat. My attention is on the chat section. If I may read your comment, you said seems more likely the universe came after consciousness. We've traced back to within a nanosecond the birth of the universe and not found a hint of the appearance of consciousness yet. Yeah, because it has no color, it has no shape. You can only trace that which is shaped. So consciousness is strangely, yes, you can say it comes before, but you at the same time can't, I find. You know, it's a coin flip of a decision what came first. That means consciousness, if we give it that it's based on objectivity, if it's based on the brain, so the brain is the product of an unconscious universe. So what that means is there is an unconscious universe, and the brain and consciousness may feel it is the source of its universe. So what it is it is a game of conditions and symbol attribution, right? In regards to the philosophical way, we can look at language as kind of designing the problem. But the thing is that yes, consciousness has to come before, because how could consciousness know it's here? That means how could something that can't experience itself be here, be able to move, be able to adopt? So what? So it is very true. I mean, I'm not disagreeing with you, Wax, Bobby. I mean, what I'm saying is that of course I consider, yes, it is attributeless at its core. Like Marcus Aurelius, he said the soul is dyed with the color of its thoughts. So really, consciousness is the word is hollow. It's like an I find consciousness the word to be an unknown x variable in an equation. That means it literally cannot, you cannot know. It's the unknown, you know? So my view was, yeah, we have an option of tracing and having the linearity of knowledge, trying to see, okay, does consciousness come first or is it something else? Do you know, does the unconscious first come first or the conscious come first? You know, could the unconscious be silently harboring hidden conscious ways of being? I don't know. But I'm saying, like, you can always wonder about which side of the coin landed on the table first, you know. But I'm saying that I'm constantly realizing that the responsibility of the mind of man is no longer becoming one of trying to live in a solid way. I feel like our mind is becoming like a state of, sorry, the state of a substance. It's as if some people, their minds are solid. Some people, their minds are liquid. Some people, their minds are gas. They don't even experience a mind in the moment. They're a pure experiential creature. So I'm looking at our civilization. I'm seeing all of our value and economical survival is dependent on, in some sense, the solidity of who we are. That means I find myself when I leave the house to actually kind of like dress up in a certain architecture of archetype, you know, because society is the unknown percentage of the day increases. The more the unknown increases, the more you want to protect what you know, you know. So I'm saying that if there is a way where we can see the world purely material, if there's a way where we can see the world 50% material, 50% something unknown, you know, and then if there's a way, some people like those yogis in India who see 100% unknown. So you see, to a yogi, they would question you and they would say there is no individual consciousness from the beginning. That's truly how the light is in your eyes. You know, so it's kind of saying, am I light being a human or am I a human that is in light? You know, like it's an incredible kind of question to ask, no? Of course, all our minds, all our subjective realms are solar powered. So the thing is, if Bobby, if you say we've traced back to within a nanosecond the birth of the universe and not found a hint of the appearance of consciousness yet. Two questions. How can we identify the type of consciousness that was there? And how do we know that in the phases of the evolution of the cosmos, of the universe, there weren't phases where the whole cosmos was multidimensional and then phases it was singular? That means the mind, if we treat it as a substance, you can solidify into any belief. You can say, I am this and I am that, and that's it. You know, you're a solid creature, you know? Or, for example, those people who are like, okay, I see the solidity, but what is there? I mean, like, am I just atoms in space, or is there more to this hallucination of electrons, of this hallucination of neurochemistry? Could it be an opportunity to at least ask the question if the answer is unattainable? So I'm saying that we have to realize this is kind of, it's not the problem of science. It's problem of like society, where society is not per se a purely rational and irrational place. Because as much as a person looks at the day and he tries to figure out what's going on, those are the known patterns that the person extracts out of the moment. But there's so many unknown patterns, many unknown things that move things. Now, we tend to ascribe stories to them, or based on our more principled universal philosophy, it opens us to us as whether it's God's work or it's man's kind of mind's work, you know? Like, I find that we have to treat our inner life as if it's phenomenology that can be piloted by the present attention. I have experienced it. I consider it a strange blessing in disguise that I had a dream where in the dream I could move, really run really fast. And I kind of woke up kind of shocked because I'm like, whoa, my body is asleep, but my mind created a body that I could run faster with in my dream. I could even control the direction I would run. I didn't control the landscape, but I could control the direction of my dream. I'm like, whoa, the mind is simulating embodiment. And then I also realized, this was the blessing in disguise, that I experienced my free will in my subjective realms in that dream state. So I experienced free will inside my mind while my body is asleep on the bed. And then when I realized that, I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. The human psychology this is the problem. That's the whole problem with therapy. It's not a linear problem, it's an onion style problem where the person has had an experience and tunneled through the designs of that experience into another experience, into another experience to eventually become who they are. And at some point, I think this would be the honorable psychologist. I will kind of clap for this psychologist. You know, if this psychologist looks at the person who's come to ask for help and says, hey, buddy, nobody has your eyes. And it's easy to be responsible for the body, but it is much more complex to be responsible for your vision because it requires the alignment of breath, but also the importance of the context of your true nature. That means if life is a once in a lifetime journey, guess what? Live it well. And that living well means you will have to look in the mirror a couple times and see a different self, only to realize that the eyes that of the true urge, the true inspiration of evolution is not attributed. It is literally like a vacuum pulling, an attributeless vacuum pulling all manifestation towards itself. It is strangely the apocalypse of the mental individual realm. Now, I'm not saying this is like a narrative to entertain. I feel that whether you like it or not as a person, in accordance to the experiences of what is real to you, you choose to adopt. That means it's like when you see something, you don't just, at first maybe when you were young, you would run after it. But now it has become something where you look, you wonder, you consider it with, and this is the thing about patience. Patience is a virtue because a person thinking about solving a problem who's patient gets to see the various dimensions, gets more access to information before action and decision. It's kind of thinking life for the mind is like a chess game against the world, and at first. And so you're waiting for the world to move first and then you move. You can say that is wisdom. What you can also say that maybe, just maybe, the species is evolving beyond language and we are experiencing something like a caterpillar. That means I totally agree and I will clap for the evolutionary biologists who really, you know, glorifies evolution. But I will tell you this, that in the insect kingdom, it is not so. How is it a caterpillar, a creature with legs, goes into a metamorphosis and becomes, in a very short duration of time, a butterfly, a creature with wings? What is this effort of evolution to be first a creature that has many experiences of legs and then suddenly a creature appear as a creature with wings, right? So we see a caterpillar doesn't take 4 billion years to evolve, you know? What's up with that? So that means the nature of our reality, really, in our effort to advance, will mean we have to confront the unknown more. But we will, how can I tell you? It's like when you trust the moment learns to trust you. And there, in every moment of your life, there will come a moment where there's a sort of frame of confrontation. Okay? So, what I mean by this, guys, is that when your conscience appears, think as if uh, the voice of the cosmos is your conscience. You see, becomes aware of how attention moves. You know, I say language is evocational. That means I on some level I can also say the language I have is not able, cannot consciously acknowledge a symbolic reference. Because a dimension beyond dualism means really you can't tell why the chicken came first or the egg. We just see they're both here. So you can't tell if consciousness or matter came first because you see they're both here. And this is something I'm not saying. Vedic thought says it. The dance of Purusha and Prakriti, matter and consciousness are simultaneous. An egg, just for us to linearize that was the karmic loop, you know? It's kind of like the title suggests wondering how you could be distracting yourself in this moment, in just in the general consideration of the lifetime you have navigated through. And really, it's such an empty piece of paper, of course. You can write anything, you can look at anything and animate it, whether into cheerfulness or into sorrow. You can look at an artwork and see it as a masterpiece, or you can see it as the fool's errand. You know, there are some passions and some hobbies where I have entertained in my mind, I've physically never done, you know? Like I have never sculpted a statue. Like a next level giant statue, you know? But I'm telling you, I gotta build the context. Michelangelo has this quote, and he says, I saw the angel in the stone and I set it free. He was a great sculptor. And he's that dude who drew that kind of artwork on the Sistine Chapel where the finger of man is touching the finger of, is attempting to touch the finger of God. So Michelangelo, he saw the angel in the stone and set it free. And there has been many times where physically I could not entertain the desire, but there was enough visualization potential to wonder what my mind would be like if I had that desire. Sometimes it's good to think not just about your success in the future, like I'm speaking to all those law of attraction people, like any person who holds that banner, like do not just see your success, because the man who has not seen failure first can hold no success. And the ordered dimensions of the mind do not just arrive. There is a sort of yin yang balance to things. Rumi says chaos and order are like the wings of a bird. So what does that mean? That means, think of it this way: consciousness and matter is where all the order is coming from, everything we're extracting, and consciousness is like chaotic. Whoa, what is this? It makes no sense. In the subtitle, I've written a new supply and demand. And I was really thinking that how would we as a species imagine? I often entertain a better world if the potential is there. And I was wondering, okay, let's say the civilization was pretty advanced, there was no violence, we were all incredibly realizing the value, how much the mind is a resource, and a human life like that is filled with resources means more greater innovation in regards to the mental realm. So it's like when we realize we're the puppeteer of our strings as a species, we will realign ourselves. When we realign ourselves, we will suddenly realize rather than requiring a system of governance, we require to make the whole world into a library. Now, what I mean by this is in regards to all the economical institutions and whatnot, in regards to all the businesses, do you know? Because you see, mythology cannot develop unless various systems collide together, you know? I think, to be honest, a lot of mythology was trying to preserve the constellations. Yeah. A civilization where its state of mind is in, like, playfully, as I was saying, like that liquid state, it means it is comfortable with the known and the unknown. There's this giant question that if the person doesn't know who they are, how can, even if the planet makes extraterrestrial contact, know what is making contact with what? I think at first the person is seeking knowledge, but then you will search the unknown authentically. When you reach let me tell you what I mean by that. That means, like, you kind of get a notebook and you just sit somewhere, and for a second feel as if the waves of time have washed away everything you as a person did, and you're just looking as if your eyes open for the first time at where you are. You see, there's a difference between the observance and then you arise your subjective realm. For me, if you notice, like when I speak, it's as if I'm seeing a film behind my eyes, and I'm just trying to translate that into words, right? So that's why it's like it's a sort of a memory in accordance to the image. So strangely, like, I'm kind of storifying my own story as I'm saying it, to remember it. The economies, or let's say like this, we take supply and demand on a survival, because survival nowadays is in the concrete jungle, right? So this survival in the concrete jungle, we go to the psychology of the animal. And of course, we not only every person is prone to the whole fight or flight kind of view. We can enter, confront the external realm, or we can, just remain in our inner realms. You a moment where you feel nobody has your eyes, and nobody, including even yourself, knows what all of this is. And then in that neutral wonder of the fascination of the process, then you start doing, it's like you got to have little victories, and then you suddenly win the war. You win little battles, and then you suddenly win the war. You have certain moments of precision based effort, and then suddenly certain uh, karmic structures arise. You know, I can kind of say I feel like I'm looking at this world of ours, and I'm seeing that there is so much behind people's eyes, but its ways of getting out are being lost as people in society feel that in order to survive and fit in, they have to be something different than they are. I could say it's the vast civilization now, the way it's designed, many societies, it's the mass genocide of the creative, unique self. That means imagine your genetics being unique. Okay, your ancestors lived a unique life. Your whole conditioning was unique. Your environment you were born in, the environments you lived through, where everything you have gone through as a being. So it's like, I'm gonna create a story right now. Let's say this king passed away, and he had lived the most as much as possible enlightened life. and he had done many responsible things for the world. And then he suddenly finds himself at the pearly gates, outside of Heaven's Gate. And we suddenly see at the same time there is a fool. There is a person who was like the jester, like a clown. Not even a clown, like a fool. That's a better way of saying it. We don't want to bring Batman into this. So the king is there, and he suddenly looks at this kind of messenger at the gates, this voice at the gates, and he says, how is it that I lived my whole life trying to attain the greatest greatness, bringing the greatest greatness, And then how is it that this fool who did nothing is entering in the same way as me into heaven? First of all, the voice says, hey, buddy, be careful about your ego. We don't want to send you back. And the voice says to the king, because this fool abided by his truth, as you did. You just required a more complex outline to do so. So that's kind of what I'm saying, guys. I want you to treat your mind like Jon Snow, and when you look in the mirror, saying, you know nothing, Jon. Because even Socrates says the only true wisdom is to know you know nothing. It's like, what do you do after you have ability? Imagine life gave you the greatest of abilities. You could do anything you ever wanted. Now imagine you did that thing you always wanted for a long time, super long time. You went through towards self-gratifying and self-actualizing just the self. Your life was just directed about yourself. It was like you were the only main character in your life. You see, I think that's what love really truly means, when actually it's another mind becomes the main character of your life. You know, that means the attention is different. We are sounds in space. Ultimately, because we see so many different ways that intelligence is occurring on the surface of this planet, we do consider a multidimensional system. The advanced civilization must be multidimensional, and the way it should be designed, there should be debate on this, but I say that my recommendation is that we must build civilization in the image of the human body. That means it might sound strange, but it's like as if God created man in his reflection. Man must create civilization in his own reflection. Children all around the world must be introduced to. Every person must become a doctor, I think, in primary school. You know, we must have such crystallized focus of knowledge. It's like, what is true education when your experiences update the value of the system? How can we define ourselves where through every new experience we have, we accumulate something more, we see something more occurs? It's kind of like a person looks in the mirror and takes responsibility for their biological being. I just don't understand why the person cannot look in the mirror and take responsibility for their free will. I think independence of any sort cannot arise unless one is willing to walk alone. And when you walk alone, you have to rely on your own, on what on the hand that is dealt to you in life. And so when you get that hand, you eventually, based study it, you find various ways that it can implement. And it has to do with honest wonder, because sometimes it's like I have felt in regards to my questions that have come to my mind, I have been a fool running into like unknown kingdoms, and it's like finding myself being like, whoa, I have no idea where I am, you know. So there has been moments where I have seen animate intelligence beyond the domains of my free will's interpretation. But that I don't take it too seriously, because I realize the potential of the mind. As if you had an imagine you had a you created, like I say this, what's the greatest invention to invent? An invention that creates endless inventions. So now imagine this inventor's like, oh shit, I don't need to invent anything else because this invention is inventing. And the guy's like, oh my god, what do I do? You know, I can't do anything anymore. You know, this invention is better than me. You know, and so what happens is, eventually either the inventor will destroy that invention that is replacing it, or the inventor will shift its whole conscious constitution towards one where it's not, I don't want to say it's flight, but it's readoption through different structure. So I think it's like we human beings, even if we made extraterrestrial, imagine we made extraterrestrial contact and the aliens were good guys. Yeah. And so, but no way to speak to the aliens, and the aliens weren't telepathic, and we're like, holy shit, how do we speak to these? And we would realize that we would have to create some sort of symmetry of communication, do you know? So what that would mean is as if we would have to speak the language of actions, you know. It's like through body language you communicate to someone who doesn't speak the same language, you know. It's like asking directions from somebody who doesn't speak the language, and the person hears the word, the address you're looking for, knows that he knows it, but knows he can't communicate, and only with his fingers and like with one word he's trying to give you a direction, you know. And in that moment, due to the struggle of the communication, you of course say thank you, sir, and you go by, but also having acknowledged the instruction. So you see, I consider social, just they say the human being is a social creature, the social life to be artwork. You know, that's the only way the humility of it can be preserved, or it's gonna feel artificial. It's gonna feel as if something else is causing you to be something that you're not actually causing yourself to be, you know? So that's kind of like the reversion back to the novel free will, that's the presence of your moment. So that's when yourself doesn't become a distraction, it just becomes a certain content of the moment your attention was stuck on. And life is, of course, more complex. You know, sometimes the person can have the greatest vision, but deep down they see the emotional realms have not sworn their allegiance. As if, like, the person has a great vision, sees a great idea, but it's as if history is like, I'm not letting that idea in. Sorry, guys, this thing was on mute. Damn. Builders. I was just saying, guys, that people, their attention is so much on their inner realms that, uh, in some sense, they're filtering the meaning of their outer realm. And how the person is aware in the present moment of who they are is there's a presence of attention, there's a projection of a thought. That projection of a thought is a subjective hovering. It's hovering in an invisible room. Okay? I have this prediction, not prediction, but this hypothesis that from the forehead is legit like one of those old school film projectors. You know what I mean? Because I'm telling you, just putting your palm on your forehead cuts the rhythm of thought instantly. So it's as if like you can say it's as if the sight is more than sight. So Wax Bobby, I wanted to tell you something in the comment section. In regards to your comment, regardless of the greatest scientific finding, it is being brought to a very evolved hunter gatherer kind of, you can say a very evolved global tribe. As a society has given chaotic ideas as much freedom as ordered ideas. Do you know? That means most ideologies have a subconscious chaotic judgment over the world. The ideologies that don't have a subjective chaotic kind of intent, those ideologies are void to begin with. So it's as if it's like some person is asking you to buy something, the other is not. And so you go to talk to the person who's not asking you to buy something and tells you, why is this guy buying to asking me to talk? Like, you know? And that person says, because we're salesmen and we got to sell you this. And the person, based on the honesty, listens to the product, you know, promotion or whatever. That means our findings, our scientific findings, are being brought into a coagulation of human perceptions of life that vary in regards to rational decision making or irrational. And even when we look at rationality as philosophers, you can say philosophers have a strange ability to, like, you can say language is the shield of the philosopher against uh, too firm of a materialistic ideology. Why? Because language is the captain of the ship. And so the language of your mind is suggesting who you are. Now imagine you changed. You suddenly, like in one moment, you're like, whoa, I can choose. What is this choice? It's my attention to vision. What is vision? It comes in forms. What is form? It is in a universe and with a cyclical motion. Do you know? So that means eventually living in a cycle is rhythmic. Whether we like it or not, we will feel rhythms. That kind of like rock star on stage in the zone, that rock star behind his eyes is in a rhythm. He's not experiencing an individual. He's being a vast sight of inner and outer landscapes. So if we find a new way about talking something, we will have a new way of explaining it. So on some level, we are limited to not being able to kind of give an attribute to consciousness because it was there prior to the form. Because consciousness is not an objective thing. It's pretty much the spotlight where the object is in. You know, we can say it's like the person looks at an object and it's like suddenly in their subjective realm there's the reflection of the name of that object, image, or whatever. I find that order without chaos cannot evolve. Chaos without order cannot evolve. So when you look, if you just looked at both of your hands in front of you, whoever you are, just look at your whole body. It's a general principle that there's a sort of symmetrical law. And so when you begin to kind of wonder about the symmetrical relationship of the objective realm and the subjective realm, you see it's opposite. Do you see? So it's as if there is a strange symmetry, but it's a reverse polar symmetry. So our minds are experiencing good and bad, but our bodies are just lands like in a realm of particles in space. So you see, we are the life in matter, right? Because when I say we are the life in matter, that means the movement is originating where there also appears to be a subjective free will. It's fascinating because culture is going to become the walls of like it's culture is it's so fascinating. It's like at some point looking at life and thinking everything is wrong, and then looking at something and seeing everything could have never been wrong. You know, they asked this person, "How have you been undefeated in battle?" And the guy's like, I'm a slow learner. I don't know what defeat means." The person had no concept of defeat. It was just continual of the forces of life. And so I feel the legacy of the human being is to kind of like before the last breath, push that like billiard ball, kind of push that sphere into motion and then close your eyes. So I find the human responsibility, especially for now, see, like I'm telling you, I feel the people, the humanity that is alive now should look at its ancestry and be like, guys, watch this, and do the greatest of all performances just to see if it can, just to see if there is. Like, isn't that the most scientific way of saying we want to see if it's possible? Right? So we experiment. So similarly, I'm saying we want to see if the greatest civilization is possible. We want to see if we can have architects sitting down and thinking, what kind of houses will be designed 10,000 years from now? And I will tell you, most of them will be looking at the sky. Because it's as they say, like the most intelligent city is a city that can handle the consequences of nature, right? So imagine in all our history where tsunamis, earthquakes, volcanoes, natural tragedies have occurred, that the cities could have just lifted up into the air. Do you know? It's like we find ourselves in a situation where the more reality extinction is inevitable, the more we feel the hedonistic life gets momentum. It's like freedom always comes at a cost, because if the person is given freedom and in their freedom they choose not to see the world, that means you have a freedom to care and not care for what is in front of your eyes. If you don't care too much about what's in front of your eyes, guess what? Strangely, you will stop caring about your thoughts and you will go into a state of, and I call it, it's like the person stepping in a puddle of thought. It's a nihilistic kind of vision. You see, emptiness should be acknowledged, not that there's just emptiness, because that'll freak you out. You have to see the concept of emptiness cannot be considered if there's nothing there, if there's not some fullness, if the polarity is not there. So the way you kind of combat fear is wondering about the reverse design of the moment and realizing that if you can confront that and if you can confront the moment, then it's as if with more information there is more ability. You're literally more informed to decide. So you got to learn from the wilderness of your own vision. And this is something that no person can teach because nobody has your eyes. That I don't understand what people do in therapy. you know I understand the need. I understand there is confusion that of course requires the assistance. What I frown upon is the notion that my eyes are the responsibility of someone else when they can't see my eyes. That bothers me. It bothers me, but it doesn't mean it frees you from being dependent on certain methods of survival. That means I've had moments where I've looked at the sky and I'm like, what if I'm not the person I believe I am? What if there is a chaotic self and an ordered self? What if, as Carl Jung says, there is the shadow? or the anima or the animus. So what that means is beliefs are how attention, which side of this scale, spectrum attention is on. If you're a person who thinks you're really good right now, and that goodness is based on a conditional subjective position, when you wake up in the day or when something changes your subjective landscape, because language is evocational, when your attention moves from that alignment, you will suddenly feel you're bad. So you will suddenly feel the world is bad. It's like this story where these grandkids wanted to pull a prank on their grandfather, so they put a tiny stinky piece of cheese, like a smelly piece of cheese, on the grandfather's nose, on his mustache, and right underneath his nose, and the grandfather can't tell, like, you know. And of course, these kids probably know that children don't go to hell, so they're taking advantage. I'm joking, guys. I'm joking. Like, you know, if we can't laugh at something, that means we can't truly observe it. Um, the grandfather wakes up and he's like, okay, that was a good nap. And he suddenly the smell hits him. And he's like, whoa, 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 something is off. And he suddenly realizes this smell is in the room. And he's like, oh my God, what is this? He goes to outside of the room, goes to the bedroom, and he sees, oh my God, it stinks there too. He goes to another room, it stinks there too. He goes to the kitchen, it stinks there too. And he can't stand it. It's like he doesn't know where the smell's coming from, and it's driving him insane. And so he runs outside the door, and this is the kind of moral of the story, where he opens the door and goes outside, and he's like, I made it to my freedom. And suddenly see, oh my God, the smell is there. And he says, the world stinks, oh my God. And he thought that this civilization was inefficient because of a minor problem in the inner realm. We are sight navigating the manifestation. This is the most phenomenal discovery, isn't it? Discovering that there's someone that's able to discover. Like, that's next level, isn't it? I feel we need to create a demand for studying the inner realms. I feel all educational institutions must begin requesting, and I feel this is the future where the educational system pays the student. If, like, think about it. Why are most people on the streets in violent situations? Because they want money, right? So now, what if what gave them money was also knowledge? So that as they gained money, they also gained knowledge. And I realized, wait a minute, what if we created a kind of corporate culture overall where the person would just come into, I don't know how to say it, but it's like um, a corporate culture where the inner realms are not restricted by old school patterns of behavior. You see, there is two options in life. Either you look for diamonds, or you get rid of the dirt in your eyes and you realize you are the diamond. And in the Diamond Sutra, it says, keep your mind alive and free without abiding in anywhere or anything. That means, how can the ultimate be? Be even being, it is beyond it. So we are creatures of vision and ultimately creatures of attention. I say attention is the god of your thoughts. Where your attention goes, thoughts animate. Now, a person can physically move and the environment becomes kind of like their moving imagination. Or you can kind of say the person's still, and then the rhythms, the shores of their inner realms are felt in the simple mind. It's as if strangely, once you become content with the sand in the hourglass, you find yourself to also be on like the beach of a sand. Like for me, exploration doesn't mean that you always get to carry what you know with you into the unknown. we cannot control thought in some sense. The content, as Sadhguru says, the content of your mind is not choice. You can control the attention that flies over the thought. Do you know? So when I speak, I don't have access to a storehouse of kind of linearized ways I've planned things. It's just I realize I'm a creature in a world, and my eyes have been open, and I have access to what my sight is. But the contemplation of the further potentials of what this rock in the middle of nowhere can imply is that it's either we are held in a unknown truth, or we have to use whatever tools accessible to build an advanced civilization. So when we become inspired to advance knowledge in unknown ways, that's the right path of the educational system. That's when advanced civilized symptoms of an advanced civilization. When you see those, you gotta defend it. When you see there's this concept I have, this is pretty much gonna be like uh, one of the like I think it might be my magnum opus one day if I get to finish it. But it's called The Pillars of Civilization. And I've created this idea that there are values in civilization that you must defend. Doesn't I don't care if you're a evil person or a good person. You just have to defend these values because they are necessary for the advancement of civilization. It's as if suddenly this genius lawyer went to all the evil people of the world and all the good people of the world and in some sense found a way to kind of bring a sort of declaration and say, guys, listen, stop fighting, stop killing all the future minds of the species, and let's see what an advanced civilization would look like, and you'd get compensated. And imagine this lawyer, great lawyer, just in that instant, like sealed the deal. That means the sacrifice that good and evil would do. Oh, um, Fran, I don't know how to pronounce your name, but Rice, I want to tell you that. Oh, Franz Rice. Franz M. Rice. So I think your name's Fran. I don't know. So welcome to the chat, man. Yeah, yeah, of course you're welcome. Feel free to listen. I'm not taking it as any sort of distraction. I'm just trying to say that I'm just entertaining a landscape where the potentials of it's like you have a mind that's a unique instrument. Right now that you're alive, your mind is playing a melody. Now, nobody on this planet knows what this melody is because if you don't know it, how could others? So when you realize this, you got to realize, okay, if I can't experience what I'm saying, then why am I saying it? You know what I mean? So when you become truly experiential oriented, it means you can experience a moment on this planet where you were never an object, never a subject, you're just the presence of the moment. As still and silence kind of are the commanders of all movement and noise. There is a strange kind of thing that I think is going on. You can say this can border on the line of a scientific, science fiction kind of thought. That I feel there is a strange donut kind of ring around our planet where consciousness is strangely um, like the center of that donut. And I don't know how to say it, but it's like there's a constant oscillation between existence and non-existence. For me, it's as if we are the shadows of the light in the candle light in the room that illuminates all the objects, and suddenly the shadows come into existence. So we as the shadows are like, holy shit, how are we here? And we see beyond what we can see. The shadow can't see beyond what's creating the shadow, because if it sees beyond it, it doesn't exist. So your chaotic self, senses of self, or all your chaotic animalistic kind of biological instincts, the chaos of them will be filtered in your conscious reception of who you can be. That is not just based on who you were. So it is realizing that you can walk like many human beings on this planet with a novel mind, a mind that embraces the novelty of the moment. It becomes no longer just oriented to culture, but now we care about the display of the honest character of the human being in civilization. As we kind of purify the water of the mind of our civilization, we will in some sense have greater access to precise decision making. So we will suddenly become a civilization that celebrates skill, and the greatest skill to be able to reach the ultimatum of the skill, which is how can I say it? That which goes up must come down. So there are some great warriors who, for them, the way they take out their sword is very similar to how the exact state of mind they put it back. It's as if like they kind of go through the combat as if acknowledging this is they separate the subjectivity from their life. They step out of who they are to handle the moment and then return to it. So that is an ability of being able to be observant of the subjective realms as they simulate. Sorry, guys, I had to write something before I forget it. Wow. So I've pretty much said a lot about the ideas I wanted to communicate here, guys. If you guys want to say anything in the chat section, feel free to do so. I will respond. Um, I don't know what it is, but we are energetic creatures, and this energy is wondering about its value as it's expressed. And I feel if its value is not given a conscious direction, it will not move enough to learn from its unconscious. So, it's as if like I am walking behind my eyes alongside many of self, like an infant. Like imagine you standing between two mirrors and seeing those reflections of yourself. Now imagine being able to close your eyes and seeing all those ways that the self could exist. Another way of saying this is imagine you kind of like getting a comb and then closing your eyes and in your mind imagining all the different ways you can comb your hair or move something. And that's just a freaking like example, The design of certain cultural programs embrace the character and the will and the nature of the person. Certain cultural programs do not. And what I mean by that is eventually in this life, after looking at all the ways there are that you can potentially live it, you wonder if you want to just live with past kind of suggestions or you want to kind of unfold your own myth. So, what does that mean? That means trusting the potential of your inner realm to efficiently externalize. And that's when visions come running to you, as they say, do not chase the butterfly of wisdom. Sit among the lotus, about among the flowers by the pond, and the butterfly will land on your forehead. Abide by what you naturally are prior to any thought, and then as thoughts come by, with the wisdom of your moment, flow on. The great distraction of self, you know, is saying that it's a phase of pretty much I think all sorts of civilizations will hit this point. All civilizations hit this point where they have maintained a sort of stability only to realize all that time has been observational. So it's like you're a creature learning from your life as it is happening. So what do you do with all these new updates of your own moment that you perceive as your attention kind of like pilots into various experiences? It's strange, but it's like back in the day there was an artist who had a family and life was good, and suddenly the village was attacked. Imagine in medieval times, and that artist for the first time had to use a sword and realize that in that chaotic situation, let's at least make the one last art, you know. So once a species can no longer be distracted by its individual life, it will begin caring for its collective life, and that's when the inner realms of people have a responsibility to integrate. As that network begins, I feel a sort of multidimensional renaissance is going to occur. A renaissance where the inner realms are being poured out as if it is the grandest performance of them all. You know? So it's as if the value of your life really has to do with how active you are. Like someone running from a bear, you imagine a philosopher came to them and it's like, hey man, what is your philosophy on life? He's like, bro, it's running away from a bear, okay? You know? And so his philosophy was defined by his action, by his energy levels, by the animate potential of the emotional and subjective simulations behind our eyes. So you see, we are an advanced civilization has to do with the tools that it is aware of, and now we are realizing we are that great. So guys, the audio should be working. If not, then I guess that's what's happening. Think of it this way, guys. This is the last thing I'm going to say. Imagine every day happens once. Imagine you are eyes in space, and imagine nobody on this planet knows anything. How would you, in quotations, re-wonder, wonder about the design of it all? Get access to your own vision, then it becomes super easy to clarify what is your vision and what is real to you in your personal dimensions and impersonal dimensions. And then we imagine a society where instead of people's beliefs causing them to have behavioral confrontations, it's as if when one person says something rude, in that moment, everybody in the environment is like, yo, guys, relax. This man is in his subjective realm. He's conscious enough to know where he is. He's still in his inner realms. You see? So we handle chaos by wondering why it's not behind man's eyes, why it has dared externalize. And once we become conscious of the value of, in some sense, uh, reminding chaos of the order within, we have no other choice. We're 8 billion creatures that must now think of inventing a new narrative that will make our children's children be like, oh man, look at how our ancestors were so advanced. It's like we're all doing this so we impress the children of the 10,000 generations ahead. I remember as a kid, uh, being introduced to, in Canada, the first settlers, the pioneers, that, they managed to, attain syrup from trees. And it's incredible because in any moment of life, there is enough of a landscape where, based on the engagement of you with the landscape, the technologies and innovations arise. So you can say the civilization that is very technological, the creatures in that civilization had more of an advanced awareness to their environment. Do you know? And so when we realize we don't, like, instead of, it's like it's like acknowledging people as two selves, you know? In certain cultures this is very well refined, where in that cultural atmosphere it's like, even if the person does make a mistake, there is a tolerance to remind the person of who he was before the mistake. For the objective realms, go look in a mirror. For the subjective realms, you require stillness, silence, and an honest ability to confront your own intelligence and its source. And then it doesn't matter what distraction there is. You're wondering about the cause. You're wondering about how, if life is an illusion, how is that illusion even being experienced? By what is it being, is the illusion experienced? So the illusion is fundamentally, the truth and the illusion are the same, present in the same witness of the same experiencer. We are as aware as we are aware that we're not. Rise, mankind, rise.